Okay, let's open the file on this one. We're cracking open a modern mystery that actually has its roots way back in Cold War science. We're talking about a kind of warfare that doesn't target buildings or bridges, but the human mind itself. This is an investigation into the science of what are being called neuroweapons.
So our story starts in a place you've definitely heard about, Havana, Cuba. And with a phenomenon you probably know as Havana syndrome. For years, U.S. diplomats were reporting these bizarre, just awful symptoms. And the key thing here is this wasn't just in their heads. I mean, look at these brain scans. Researchers at the University of Pennsylvania found real physical changes in their brains. We're talking differences in the actual white matter. This was hard evidence of a physical injury. And the symptoms? They were just brutal. This wasn't a simple headache. We're talking crippling migraines, a constant maddening ringing in their ears, vertigo so bad they couldn't stand up, memory loss, and serious trouble just thinking clearly. These were sharp, healthy people who were suddenly completely debilitated by something. So, that brings us to the one central question that drives this whole explainer. What in the world could do this? What kind of technology can reach out invisibly over a distance and cause actual physical damage to a person's brain? The search for that answer is going to take us down two very different paths of research that, believe me, end up in the same very unsettling place. Okay, our first trail leads us back in time into the shadows of the Cold War and all that secret Soviet weapons research. But they were just trying to build bigger bombs. They were working on something way more subtle, what they called remote biological effects. Basically, how to influence a living thing without ever laying a finger on it. So how is that even possible? Well, for that, we turn to the work of a German researcher, Dr. Serge Kernbach. Now, he didn't just read the old Soviet research papers. He actually went into his lab and rebuilt the technology. He's the guy who gives us the first piece of the puzzle, the engineering, the how-to. He literally built the machine. And the science behind these machines is, well, it's pretty mind-bending. It all hinges on something called the Aharonov bomb effect. Now stick with me here. The simplest way to think about it is like creating a ghost of a magnetic field. The field itself isn't really there, but its potential is. And that potential can still push around charged particles, like the little ions that fire off signals in your brain, without ever making direct contact. It's real-world action at a distance. And look, this wasn't just some theory on a chalkboard. What you're seeing here is an actual piece of Soviet hardware from the 1980s called a SAG generator. This is the exact kind of device Dr. Kernbach recreated. It was designed for one purpose, to harness that weird quantum effect and see what it did to living things. This pulls the whole idea right out of science fiction and drops it into the real world of military tech. So how do you aim an invisible force? Well, the tech uses something called a pointing vector. You can think of it like a mathematical arrow that shows which way the energy is flowing. By tweaking the fields, they could basically create and aim this energy arrow and that non-local potential that goes with it right at a specific target. So, okay, we have the emitter, but what about the receiver? And that brings us to the second file in our investigation. Because for any weapon to work, you need a target that's actually vulnerable to it. This next rabbit hole takes us to a controversial neuroscientist in Canada who basically spent his entire career figuring that part out. This is Dr. Michael Persinger. And while Kernbach was over in Germany focused on the machine, Persinger was in his lab in Canada, completely obsessed with the mind. His whole life's work was about the biology. He gives us the other half of the answer, how and why the human brain could possibly react to these weird, invisible fields.
And Persinger, he wasn't thinking small. I mean, just look at this quote. He was digging into things like quantum entanglement, that spooky action at a distance Einstein talked about. He was asking these huge questions like, is our consciousness itself somehow linked or entangled with the fundamental fields of the universe?
But he didn't just ask questions, he ran the experiments. And this right here is the proof. This is a brain scan from his lab. What it shows is that when he exposed someone to a really weak but very specifically patterned electromagnetic field, boom, a very specific part of their brain, the medial frontal gyrus, just lit up with activity. He proved you could actually influence brain function from the outside. And here it is in black and white, the hard data. This chart shows a massive, statistically significant jump in a certain type of brainwave activity, but only when the field was turned on. That's the light bar. The dark bar next to it, That's the placebo, the control group, where nothing happens. I mean, it's a crystal clear cause and effect. The brain is acting like a receiver, and it can be tuned to these outside signals.
Okay, so now we have these two completely separate lines of research, right? We've got an engineer in Germany rebuilding old Soviet tech, and a neuroscientist in Canada poking at the brain with magnetic fields. And this is where the story gets really compelling, because their work, done thousands of miles apart, starts to overlap in some truly remarkable ways.
Let's just lay it out side by side. On the one hand, you have Dr. Kernbach, the engineering guy. His whole question was, how do you build the transmitter? On the other hand, you have Dr. Persinger, the neuroscience guy. His question was, okay, but how does the receiver actually work? One was studying the machine, the other was studying the mind.
But here's where it gets wild. Look at what they both found, completely independently. Both of them noticed this really strange 7 to 8 minute delay before any effects would show up. I mean, how specific is that? Both of their experiments dealt with non-local phenomena. Both pointed to the Aharonov-Bohm effect as a key piece of the puzzle. And, most critically, both of them tied their physics experiments directly to changes in biological systems. That kind of independent corroboration, that's powerful stuff.
And if you need a smoking gun, here it is, from Dr. Kernbach himself. After successfully rebuilding the Soviet device, he's asking, essentially, hey, could messing with the brain's chemistry using this non-local tech cause neurological symptoms? He's an engineer, and he's basically writing out the exact medical description of Havana syndrome.
So what does it all add up to? When we put all these pieces together on the board, what's the final report? Well, the implications are, to be honest, pretty chilling.
The conclusion is almost impossible to avoid. When you take Dr. Kernbach's engineering and you combine it with Dr. Persinger's neuroscience, what you get is a plausible scientific blueprint. A blueprint for a directed energy weapon that uses quantum principles to cause the exact kind of physical brain damage and the exact symptoms that those diplomats in Havana experienced.
And just when you think this is all the stuff of spy movies and secret government labs, think again. The source material, quoting Dr. Kernbach, makes an absolutely startling claim. This technology is available on the black market.
And that leaves us with one final, pretty terrifying question. If the science is real and the technology is out there, and it's no longer just in the hands of a few global superpowers, who controls it now? And where is this new battle, the battle for the mind, being fought today?